When the angels wanted destruction of the world, the Demon King united with the humans to save it. In the year 1430 AD, Earth was invaded by grotesque entities. Humans once worshipped them as angels, but to the demons, they were nothing more than enemies. Eventually, humanity realized the truth about these so-called angels and joined forces with their former foes. A massive battle broke out. Countless brave warriors fought, and many lost their lives. Amid the chaos, one of the saints of the Holy Knights, Jean, looked around and wondered if that was truly all of them. No one answered her. Suddenly, a massive gate appeared before everyone's eyes. Jean froze as it slowly began to open. The sight left everyone in shock. From within the gate, a gigantic entity emerged. Panic spread instantly. People began fleeing in terror. Jean stared at the creature in disbelief, thinking she had never seen anything so enormous before. The monster began destroying everything in its path, laughing as it did so. Many believed this was the end. Still, Jean refused to give up. She told herself that it wasn't over yet and that the Demon King would arrive soon. She urged everyone to hold on until then. However, surviving against such a monstrous being proved nearly impossible. Jean desperately warned everyone to dodge, but many failed to react in time. She watched helplessly as destruction unfolded right before her eyes. After the devastation, the massive entity suddenly seemed irritated. As Jean slowly opened her eyes again, she saw someone standing there at last. Relief washed over her, and she realized he had finally arrived. It was the Demon King. He acknowledged that they had held out well. Jean felt a wave of relief and remarked that he had taken his time arriving. The Demon King responded with a faint smile. The remaining soldiers felt hope surge through them. They admitted that although they hated relying on a demon, he had saved their lives. The Demon King then stepped forward and confronted the massive entity directly. He declared that it would pay dearly for harming his subordinates. Dark energy surged around him as he began his attack, tearing apart the enormous being piece by piece. The soldiers cheered as they watched. However, the giant refused to go down easily. Enraged, it wildly flailed its arms, trying to strike the Demon King. Yet no matter how fiercely it attacked, the Demon King blocked every move with ease. After the strike, even Jean felt fear creep into her heart. She called out Dantalion's name in alarm, but he remained unharmed. Calmly, he remarked that it wasn't bad at all. Then he counterattacked. As the Demon King struck, the massive figure finally felt the impact. A powerful cry echoed as the blow pierced straight through its body. The creature screamed in agony, while Dantalion let out a cold laugh. However, to everyone's shock, the massive figure began laughing as well. Dark energy surged around it, growing even more intense. Dantalion kept his guard up, sensing another attack. Just then, another enormous presence descended from the sky. Everyone watched in horror. Jean immediately realized what was coming and shouted for everyone to get down. A terrifying strike crashed down from above. Jean shut her eyes tightly. When she opened them again, thick smoke filled the battlefield. Through it, she saw that both Dantalion and the massive figure were still standing. They had survived because Dantalion had cast a powerful barrier in time. Yet Jean's worry only deepened. The massive figure was still standing, and it looked more enraged than ever. Dantalion muttered that the thing was unbelievably tough. The creature then began healing itself at an alarming speed, its wounds closing almost instantly. As it prepared another attack, Dantalion did the same. Jean felt relieved seeing him gather his strength, until she noticed something else. He was sweating. That realization sent a chill through her. The enemy was preparing another strike, and this time the pressure felt overwhelming. She panicked, thinking that if they didn't finish it now, everything would be lost. She called out to Dantalion in fear. He turned to her and told her to listen carefully. Tears welled in her eyes as he told her to look after both the humans and the demons. She tried to stop him, but he had already made his decision. He formed a massive barrier around Jean and the others, sealing them inside for protection. She cried out to him, asking if he was really going to do this. He replied that he never thought he would have to use this power. As he prepared the final spell, she begged him to stop, but he calmly told her that he would stay with her until the very end. He thanked her, saying that because of her, he had come to understand humanity and had truly wanted to protect it. He said they would meet again in the next life. Then, with those final words, he unleashed his ultimate power. A blinding explosion erupted, so massive it could be seen from space. Everything was swallowed by light, and when it was all over, silence followed. Somewhere far Far away, in a quiet place, a dandelion swayed gently in the air. A figure opened his eyes and whispered in disbelief, wondering if it had worked, questioning whether he truly had a human body now. Dantalion had awakened once more, reborn. Dantalion looked outside through the window of his new body. He now inhabited the form of a second-year student of the Anti-Angel Academy, Mizukami Daya. As he observed the peaceful scenery, he commented that it was quite a magnificent view and wondered if the angels had truly been wiped out. Curious, he decided to look into the memories of the body's original owner. As the memories flowed in, he saw everything, from the boy's painful childhood to the constant bullying he had endured. He witnessed how lonely and harsh his life had been, how he had been pushed around endlessly, and how, in his desperation, he had taken a strange pill that ultimately allowed the Demon King to inhabit his body. Dantalion then watched scenes of everyday school life unfolding. Students laughed and walked about peacefully. The calmness made him pause, realizing how different this world was from the battlefield he had come from. But his attention was soon drawn to a group of students laughing cruelly nearby. He sensed something familiar and wondered if this was what had tormented the boy before. As he watched, the bullies began harassing someone again, mocking and pushing him around. Dantalion found the behavior utterly barbaric. The bullies complained that ever since Daya disappeared, they had nowhere to vent their frustration. One of them, a second-year student named Mizaki, stepped forward arrogantly and asked if Dantalion was getting cocky. Before the bully could react, Dantalion grabbed his arm. The boy froze in shock, unable to move, panicking as he felt an overwhelming strength gripping him. Dantalion casually shoved him aside, sending him stumbling. Terrified, the bullies started backing away. Dantalion coldly asked if they were the ones who had driven Mizukami Daya into a corner. One of them, trembling, asked if he was really Mizukami. Dantalion calmly replied that he was not. He was the Demon King, Dantalion. The group burst into nervous laughter, clearly thinking he had lost his mind. They mocked him, wondering if a near-death experience had finally broken him. Dantalion observed them silently, wondering if his name had truly been forgotten in this era. The bullies mocked him again, telling him not to get carried away just because he was Mizukami. In response, Dantalion effortlessly threw one of them aside, making it clear that there was nothing behind their bravado. At that moment, someone else arrived. A girl who looked remarkably similar to Jean stepped forward. She was Sakuraba Asahi, a second-year student of the Anti-Angel Academy. Seeing her, the bullies were startled and wondered why the top student had shown up. Asahi calmly questioned them, asking why they were wasting their time picking on others instead of training. When one of them snapped back at her, she firmly told them to stop. Jean's voice echoed in Dantalion's mind, telling him to stand back and let her handle it. Dantalion acknowledged her presence and told her that although he appreciated the help, it seemed the matter was ultimately between him and them. Asahi looked at him in surprise, sensing that something about him was no longer the same. Mizukami repeated that he had unfinished business. The bullies burst into laughter, mocking him and telling him to come at them if he dared, claiming he would end up in a body bag. One of them threw a punch, but before it could land, the Demon King effortlessly dodged and seized the attacker's arm, flinging him away as if he weighed nothing. Even Asahi was stunned by the display. She muttered in disbelief at the sheer power behind that movement. The bullies panicked. One of them shouted Yamajaki's name, asking if he was all right. Gritting his teeth, Yamajaki ordered the others to attack. Though fear was written all over their faces, they obeyed, hurling objects toward Mizukami. Asahi shouted a warning, but it was unnecessary. The Demon King calmly endured the assault without even flinching. When the dust settled, he was still standing there unharmed. The bullies stared in disbelief. Some laughed nervously, claiming it was impossible. Others muttered in shock, unable to accept what they were seeing. One of them exclaimed that he was blocking magic with his bare hands. Even Asahi couldn't hide her astonishment. Dantalion calmly stated that he would show them how true magic was used. Dark energy began to gather around his hands, warping the air itself. Panic spread through the group. Someone shouted that they were finished. Yet Yamajaki, still clinging to his pride, shouted for him not to get carried away, even as he prepared to strike again. As Dantalion gathered his power, memories surfaced. Visions of Mizukami being beaten, humiliated, and begging them to stop, only to be mocked and laughed at. The cruelty of it ignited something deep within him. His expression hardened. Calling the bully a brat, Dantalion unleashed his power in a single devastating strike. Yamajaki was sent flying across the ground, crashing down hard and unmoving. The others froze in terror. One of them screamed that he was a monster, and they fled in panic. Dantalion watched them go and coldly remarked that compared to what Mizukami had endured, this was nothing. Asahi stared at him in shock, unable to comprehend what she had witnessed. She asked who or what he really was. Dantalion answered plainly that he was the Demon King, though circumstances had forced him into this form. Asahi stood speechless. The words didn't make sense to her. Then, suddenly, a strange sensation passed through the air. Dantalion felt it too. His gaze lifted skyward as a vision appeared, an angel laughing before fading away. Both of them stood frozen, confused and unsettled, sensing that something far greater was unfolding beyond their understanding. At the Anti-Angel Academy, youths with exceptionally high latent mana gathered from across the nation to train for battle against angels. The atmosphere buzzed with tension as students assembled for their evaluations. One of the instructors announced that the results of this test would directly affect their grades and determine their future placement in anti-angel units. He urged everyone to give it their all. Asahi stood among the crowd, watching closely. She thought about how Mizukami had slipped away the day before and silently vowed to uncover the truth behind his power. Suddenly, a familiar voice broke the tension. The same bully from before shoved his way forward, boasting loudly and demanding everyone move aside. He claimed the top spot belonged to him and no one else. Though he was still shaken by his earlier encounter with the Demon King, his pride pushed him forward. He activated the measuring device, and moments later, the screen displayed a 4-digit number. Gasps spread through the crowd. Someone muttered that it was an incredible score, something only the top students, like Sakura, had ever achieved. The bully smirked proudly, basking in the attention. But the Demon King remained unimpressed. He quietly remarked that such mana felt brittle, a shallow imitation of true power. To him, it was proof of how much the world had softened in times of peace. The bully scoffed, convinced that Mizukami couldn't possibly produce anything noteworthy. He sneered, expecting nothing but embarrassment. Then the Demon King stepped forward and announced calmly that it was his turn. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered that he had just been hospitalized and would probably score in the single digits. Another joked that he probably only excelled at studying history. As the device prepared to measure him, the Demon King glanced at it with mild curiosity, remarking that such technology didn't exist in his era. The bully laughed, mocking him for sounding like an old man and claiming that studying was the only thing he was good at anyway. At that moment, memories surfaced of a boy studying alone late at night, struggling desperately while others mocked him. The voice of a bully echoed in his mind, telling him to run crying to his mother. The loneliness, the frustration, the helplessness, it all came flooding back. The Demon King's expression darkened. He thought about how no one had ever stood beside that boy, how no one had understood his suffering. And then he spoke, saying that the despair of someone who struggled alone was something none of them could ever comprehend. As he placed his hand on the device, a tremendous pressure filled the air. The readings skyrocketed. Students gasped as the numbers continued climbing without stopping. The machine itself began to malfunction, its display flickering erratically. The bully panicked, shouting that something had to be wrong with the device. Asahi stared in disbelief, realizing the mana output was far beyond anything she had ever seen. The instructor hurriedly declared that the machine must be malfunctioning and ordered him to move to another one. Whispers erupted among the students. Even among elite corps members, surpassing a certain threshold was considered nearly impossible. The Demon King merely smiled faintly and replied that there was no need to switch machines. He would show them slowly. The Demon King rose to his feet, a quiet laugh escaping his lips. As the device continued measuring his power, the numbers began to climb. 10,000, 20,000, 45,000, rising faster and faster. The crowd fell into panic. People shouted in confusion, wondering what was happening. The bully insisted that the machine had to be broken, but Asahi immediately denied it, saying there was no malfunction at all. The mana density was simply beyond anything the device could properly measure. The readings continued climbing until the device reached its limit at 100,000. A moment later, sparks flew, smoke burst out, and the machine completely shut down. The Demon King looked at the wreckage with mild disappointment and remarked that it was a flimsy toy. Everyone around him stood frozen in shock, unable to process what they had just witnessed. The instructor quickly regained composure and shouted that the measurements were cancelled. He announced an emergency instead. An angel had been detected in Inayama District, Tamashi Sector. All trainees were ordered to stand by and prepare to assist. Gasps echoed through the group. Some muttered in disbelief, asking if it was really happening so close by. The bully, however, grinned with excitement, saying this was finally some real action. Asahi also readied herself, sensing the gravity of the situation. Meanwhile, the Demon King felt a spark of anticipation stir within him as well. Elsewhere in the city, a young child stared up at the sky and remarked that the sight looked just like something from a textbook. His mother followed his gaze and froze in horror. Before she could react, the angel descended and seized the child. She screamed his name in desperation, but the angel only laughed. Suddenly, a blast of magic struck the angel. The bully had attacked, shouting triumphantly as he struck the creature. For a moment, he looked confident, until the angel turned, unfazed, and charged straight at him. The impact sent him flying, shattering the structure behind him. The child was still in the angel's grasp. The mother screamed again, calling out her child's name. In that instant, the Demon King appeared, catching the child effortlessly. The boy stared in awe, letting out a small cry of surprise. Asahi watched in relief and praised the save. The Demon King, however, smiled faintly and remarked that this was perfect, an ideal chance to test the limits of his current body. The angel, now facing him directly, let out a distorted cry as the two locked eyes, signaling the beginning of a true confrontation. Seeing the Demon King laugh so casually, the angel hesitated. For the first time, fear crept into its movements, and it began to pull back. Nearby, the bully watched in silence, frustration written all over his face. He muttered bitterly that his own magic hadn't done anything at all. The Demon King, however, only remarked that this was nothing more than a warm-up. He then ordered everyone to fall back. Before anyone could react, another presence arrived. It was the leader of the Anti-Angel 2nd Assault Squad, Saito Makoto. He stepped forward confidently and declared that he would handle the situation. Asahi recognized him immediately and called out that the unit had arrived. The Demon King observed him with interest, remarking that these must be the knights of this era and expressing curiosity about their skill. Saito quickly checked his status display and reported that backup would take at least 10 minutes to arrive. Hearing this, the Demon King repeated his interest in seeing what the modern warriors could do. Asahi stepped forward, offering to fight as well. Saito acknowledged her and ordered her to cover him while they held the line until reinforcements arrived. She agreed without hesitation. Saito opened fire, and his attacks struck the angel, drawing its attention. The creature reacted in irritation, clearly feeling the impact. Even the Demon King seemed mildly impressed. Asahi rushed in to strike, but before she could land her blow, the Demon King casually intercepted her attack, causing her to freeze in surprise. Saito pressed on, landing another solid hit. The angel staggered slightly. Asahi followed up by firing her weapon, and although the attack landed cleanly, it still wasn't enough to bring the creature down. Saito acknowledged the situation, stating that their firepower was still insufficient. Asahi apologized, wishing she were stronger. He reassured her, saying that fighting an angel required at least a 3-person unit. The angel retaliated, charging straight at them. Saito blocked the assault, but the pressure was immense. As the creature advanced again, the Demon King stepped in front of them both. The angel recoiled. The Demon King remarked casually that it seemed to be struggling and asked if it needed help. Saito immediately ordered him to stand down, calling him a trainee. Asahi hesitated but then spoke up, suggesting they let him assist. Saito was stunned by her words, but after a moment, agreed, on the condition that the Demon King remain in a support role. The Demon King accepted calmly and stepped forward anyway. Saito shouted in disbelief, and even Asahi was caught off guard. Then, in a blur, the Demon King struck. The angel was launched high into the air, vanishing from their immediate sight. Both Asahi and Saito stared upward in shock. Asahi whispered in disbelief, asking how he had moved so fast. Saito could only stare, equally stunned, wondering when he had even crossed that distance. In the next instant, the angel reappeared behind the soldier, moving so fast it seemed to bend space itself. Even the angel appeared shocked by what had just happened, as if it hadn't expected to be pushed that far. The soldier froze for a split second, stunned by the sudden presence behind him. Before he could react, the Demon King moved again, gathering power for another decisive strike. He descended to the ground calmly, his presence overwhelming. The soldier turned toward him and demanded to know who he really was. The Demon King, however, merely told him to stay quiet and take position. The angel screeched and soared upward once more, gathering energy in its hands as it prepared another devastating attack. The soldier immediately shouted for a shield formation, and Asahi joined him without hesitation. As the barrier formed, the angel unleashed its attack. The impact shook the area violently. Cracks spread across the shield as the pressure intensified, and debris flew in all directions. For a moment, it seemed the defense might collapse, but the Demon King stood apart, untouched. His own barrier absorbed the overflowing energy with ease. Then, calmly, he redirected that stolen power back toward the angel. The angel reeled as the reflected force struck it head-on. Its expression twisted in disbelief. Asahi let out a breath, half laughing in disbelief, asking if they had finally done it. But then she noticed something horrifying. The angel's wounds were closing. His body was regenerating regenerating. Fear tightened her chest. The soldier clenched his weapon and shouted for everyone to retreat, declaring he would hold the line. The Demon King stopped him. He calmly said there was no need for that. As energy began to gather around him, his presence alone seemed to crush the air. He stated that he would show them how an angel was truly slain. The atmosphere grew heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Still, desperation pushed it forward. It rushed at the Demon King with full force, launching itself straight toward his face. The Demon King caught the angel's arm effortlessly and crushed it in his grip. Metal screeched as the limb crumpled under the pressure. The angel's body, forged of hardened material, was completely outmatched. The Demon King even laughed as he did it. The angel staggered back in pain, no longer able to hide its fear. Its confidence shattered. It desperately began regenerating its damaged form. The Demon King commented calmly that even low-rank angels possessed impressive regenerative abilities. The bully watching nearby trembled, muttering that they never stood a chance. Others shared the same fear, watching in horror as the battle unfolded. Panicking, the angel gathered its remaining power and unleashed a massive lightning strike from above, aiming directly at the Demon King. The attack struck cleanly, yet nothing happened. The Demon King stood unharmed, unfazed by the lightning coursing around him. The angel froze in disbelief, its confidence completely shattered. Asahi gasped, unable to believe what she was seeing. She said that blocking a lightning spell like that should have been impossible. The Demon King calmly explained that an angel's regeneration depended on its mana reserves, and once those were depleted, recovery would slow and eventually stop. The soldier stared in shock, unable to understand what he was witnessing. As the angel's wounds began regenerating more slowly, the truth became clear. The Demon King noted that if they allowed it to continue healing endlessly, they would be the ones exhausted in the end. The bully, watching silently, thought bitterly that the Demon King didn't even look tired. The angel, realizing its secret had been exposed, grew visibly frantic. The Demon King then explained that an angel's core was concentrated in two areas: the head and the chest. Grabbing the angel by the head, he prepared to strike both points at once. He declared calmly that destroying both at the same time would prevent regeneration entirely. Simple, effective, and final. He asked casually if everyone had taken notes. The onlookers stood frozen in shock. Even the bully, who had mocked him earlier, could only stare in disbelief. The bully felt a wave of relief wash over him. Seeing what the Demon King was capable of, he was grateful he hadn't pushed things any further earlier. Asahi, still stunned, murmured that this was on an entirely different level. Another girl nearby whispered in awe that it was incredible. The soldier nodded in agreement, stating that understanding the theory was one thing, but executing it at this level was something only the top 5 in the world could manage. The bully clenched his fists, thinking bitterly that there was no way someone like Mizukami could have reached this level overnight. Still, he admitted defeat and thanked him for the save. Then, hesitantly, he asked who he really was. The Demon King answered calmly that he was Dandelion, the Demon King. The soldier stared at him in disbelief. He repeated the title under his breath, clearly unable to process it. Checking his status window, he confirmed the name listed was still Mizukami Daya. He commented that they would likely be working together again in the future and said he looked forward to it. The Demon King simply acknowledged it. One of the women nearby muttered that this was practically a direct recruitment into the regular forces. Asahi stood behind him, clearly unsettled. She hesitated before asking how he had become so strong so suddenly, mentioning that he used to be at the very bottom like her. The soldier echoed her confusion, questioning how such growth was even possible. The Demon King answered calmly that he had simply awakened. The group fell silent. One of the girls let out an awkward response, unsure how to react. Another asked timidly whether someone like her could ever become that strong. The Demon King studied her for a moment before saying she had potential. Her face lit up instantly at the praise. She was about to speak again when the Demon King suddenly stiffened. He sensed something and immediately warned Asahi to run. Before anyone could react, a hand burst from the air and grabbed Asahi by the throat, slamming her to the ground. She gasped in shock as the presence revealed itself. Another angel. The Demon King moved instantly. In the same moment Asahi rolled away, he struck the angel with a powerful blow, sending it flying. The creature laughed despite the damage, as if amused. Asahi stared in disbelief, saying she hadn't sensed it at all. The angel vanished in an instant. For a split second, there was silence. Then the Demon King turned sharply. The angel reappeared behind him, but before it could act, the Demon King struck again, launching it far across the battlefield. The others watched in stunned silence as the realization sank in. The Demon King spoke coldly, stating that the angel had used a form of targeted spatial movement, something no angel should have been capable of. He narrowed his eyes, interest flaring. He said that this particular vessel was worth investigating further, and that he would be dissecting it thoroughly. The battlefield fell silent. The moment another angel appeared, panic spread through the group. The soldier muttered that angels rarely appeared more than a few times a year. Asahi added that this one didn't match any known records. It was an entirely new type. The soldier grimly noted that such a variant hadn't been seen in over a century. While everyone else was still processing this, the Demon King had already stepped forward. He showed no hesitation, no fear, only calm certainty. The angel, however, began laughing wildly, seemingly amused by the situation. The Demon King prepared to strike again, but the angel suddenly rushed forward, targeting the soldier instead. The bully froze in terror as the angel lunged, its jaws opening wide. Before it could reach him, the Demon King intercepted it mid-motion, gripping the creature's head and hurling it far across the battlefield. Smiling faintly, he declared that he would handle it. The angel rose once more, launching another energy attack. The blast struck the Demon King directly, but it did nothing. He stood unmoved, completely unaffected. Then, as if to mock the attempt, he demonstrated how such an attack should be performed, shaping a far more refined and devastating wave of energy. The angel suddenly vanished, reappearing behind him in an attempt to strike from the rear. But the Demon King stopped the attack with a single finger, completely halting the blow. He remarked calmly that such an ability was rare and suggested that the angel might use it better with proper understanding. With that, he forced the condensed energy straight into the angel's body. The creature let out a distorted scream as its form began to collapse. The soldiers could only stare in disbelief. One of them whispered in shock, wondering how anyone could block a special teleportation technique so effortlessly. The Demon King, now fully aware of the angel's abilities, commented that he had figured out the mechanism behind it. He noted that it functioned much like a doorway, a spatial anchor of sorts. With that realization, he delivered the final blow. The angel's body shattered, first through the chest, then completely disintegrating. Silence followed. The Demon King stood calmly amid the aftermath, while everyone else remained frozen, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. No one laughed anymore. The soldier stared in disbelief, muttering that he had never seen power like that before. Another trainee gasped, completely stunned. Someone else whispered that this was their first real combat situation, and yet it felt unreal. The bully stood frozen, his mind unable to process what he had just witnessed. Everything he thought he understood about strength had been shattered. He couldn't tell anymore what was real and what wasn't. The soldier commented that most people would have frozen in fear in that situation, yet there was someone who hadn't even hesitated. He glanced toward the Demon King and remarked that even among elite trainees, someone like him was an anomaly. He added that even the instructors called Asahi a berserker, but compared to this man, even she paled. The Demon King replied calmly that he had already told them who he was. The soldier laughed nervously and said that calling himself the Demon King had to be a joke. Still, part of him hesitated, because nothing else could explain that kind of overwhelming strength. Asahi looked conflicted, her expression caught between awe and unease. The soldier admitted that if this was truly his power, then maybe the title wasn't entirely a joke. He added that if this much power was shocking, then facing true angels would be far worse. He went on to say that modern weapons had advanced enough to handle most threats, even angels, pointing at his gun as proof. The Demon King looked at the weapon and thought to himself how shallow their understanding truly was. The group relaxed slightly, relieved that the immediate danger had passed. Then Asahi stepped forward and asked him directly to train her. She admitted she wasn't strong enough yet and wanted to change that. The Demon King looked at her carefully. For a moment, her face overlapped with a memory. Jean, standing before him once again. The resemblance struck deep. He wondered if she truly carried the same soul. If she did, her potential would be immeasurable. The bully watched the exchange with growing irritation. He clenched his fists, unable to accept what he was seeing. In his mind, he convinced himself that this was all some trick, that Mizukami had to be cheating somehow. He told himself it had to be some kind of enhancement or drug. There was no way someone like him could reach that level naturally. And yet, despite all his denial, a small part of him feared the truth. At the Anti-Angel Academy training grounds, students were busy practicing with combat drones. Anti-Angel armaments lined the field, including the standard mana blades used for training. The bots reacted dynamically, recording data with every strike. Asahi pushed herself hard, pouring all her strength into a single blow. The display flashed, showing a damage output of 672. She let out a breath of relief, satisfied with the result. Nearby, the Demon Demon King stepped forward and examined one of the mana blades with interest. He remarked that the weapon amplified the user's mana and shaped it into a cutting edge, a fascinating piece of craftsmanship. Asahi froze when she noticed the size of the blade forming in his hand. It was far larger than normal. She rushed over, shocked, and pointed out that mana blades weren't supposed to be that large. He calmly replied that he had promised to show her something and suggested they test it. With a single swing, he struck one of the training bots. The machine instantly went into overload, alarms blaring as its systems maxed out and shut down. Asahi gasped, shouting that it had completely exceeded its limits. The Demon King examined the result and commented that the tool was convenient, though imperfect. Asahi explained that the mana blade was humanity's greatest anti-angel weapon, developed specifically to fight beings like that. It was something they studied extensively. The Demon King recalled the knowledge from the body he inhabited and acknowledged it. However, he added that while the weapon was effective, it also had a flaw. He demonstrated by channeling more power into it, causing the blade to destabilize and break apart. He explained that once the user's mana exceeded a certain threshold, the weapon became a restriction rather than an aid. Asahi stared in disbelief. She felt almost bad for the training robot that had been destroyed in the process. She admitted that the anti-angel blade couldn't handle his level of output. The Demon King then told her that if she truly wanted to grow stronger, she would need to move beyond relying on tools and instead refine her raw mana control. Another trainee, overhearing the conversation, eagerly asked if she could be taught as well. Asahi felt a little embarrassed, but the girl insisted, saying that Daya himself had once told her she had talent. Asahi hesitated but eventually agreed. The Demon King stepped forward and placed a hand near the girl's shoulder, focusing for a moment. He then pointed out that her mana flow was blocked in several places and adjusted it with a precise motion. The girl gasped as warmth rushed through her body. She felt lighter, stronger, like something had finally clicked into place. The Demon King then handed her the mana blade and told her to try again. She hesitated, eyes wide, and said she had never been able to activate one before. The Demon King calmly told her to go ahead and try it. Gathering her courage, the girl focused and activated the mana flow. To her shock, the blade formed instantly, large, stable, and glowing brightly. She gasped, unable to believe her eyes, exclaiming that it had actually worked. Asahi stared in disbelief. Even she hadn't been able to form a blade that cleanly on her first attempt. She muttered in amazement that only Sakuraba had managed something like that before. The Demon King then pointed toward a nearby training unit and told her to strike it. The poor training robot didn't stand a chance. The moment she swung, the system registered a solid hit, the number flashing clearly across the display. She gasped in delight, unable to contain her excitement. The Demon King gave a small nod of approval, praising her effort. Asahi, however, couldn't help feeling a little frustrated. She remembered how difficult it had been for her to even manifest a blade at first, and seeing someone else do it so easily made her clench her fists. She quickly spoke up, saying that she wanted to train too. The Demon King turned to her and calmly told her that it wasn't necessary. Her mana was already flowing perfectly. That answer hit harder than expected. Asahi's expression fell, and she asked quietly if that meant she couldn't get any stronger. The Demon King shook his head and explained that it wasn't that she couldn't improve, but that her path was different. For her, he said, a special training method would be required, one designed specifically for her. Hearing that, Asahi's eyes lit up with renewed determination. Rows of training robots stood lined up before them. Seeing so many at once made even the bystanders uneasy. One of the trainees muttered that it felt almost cruel to put the machines through what was coming. Asahi looked around in disbelief and asked if all of them were really meant for her. The Demon King nodded and told her to focus, urging her to push her mana to its limits. Watching the earlier demonstration, she gathered her courage and began circulating her mana. Slowly, the energy responded. Her eyes widened as she felt it surge properly for the first time. She gasped, amazed that it was actually working. The Demon King observed quietly while she formed the flow. Then he stepped forward and placed a hand on her head. The girl nearby frowned, clearly jealous of the attention. Asahi suddenly felt her strength draining away. Her legs buckled and she collapsed to her knees, breathless. She could barely speak as she said her mana was completely depleted, something she had never experienced before. The Demon King calmly explained that her energy had been drawn out intentionally. As he spoke, she felt warmth returning to her body. Her mana was flowing back, stronger, denser. She stared at him in shock, realizing what had just happened. She said it felt like her mana had been taken and then forcefully returned. That kind of technique, she insisted, defied everything she had been taught. He explained that the accepted theories were flawed. She lay there panting, barely able to move, while he told her to do it again. Confused, she asked if he was serious. He explained that by repeatedly draining and restoring her mana, her capacity and control would rapidly expand. She hesitated, reminding him that such extreme exhaustion was considered dangerous and forbidden in normal training. He dismissed the concern, saying that was exactly why progress was so slow for everyone else. Then he asked her plainly whether she was willing to continue. After a moment of hesitation, she pushed herself up and agreed. Her determination impressed him. He told her they would repeat the process 100 times. The number alone made her legs shake. She stared at him in disbelief, but he simply asked if she was ready. She swallowed hard and nodded. Hours later, she lay collapsed on the ground, completely drained, barely able to move. Her breathing was shallow, her limbs trembling from exhaustion. The Demon King looked down at her calmly and said that they had only completed 20 repetitions so far, and that would be enough for the day. She could barely respond. When she finally found her voice, she asked weakly whether anyone else trained like this. He answered honestly that even elite soldiers had never gone through such methods. And as she lay there, exhausted beyond belief, she realized she had just stepped onto a path far beyond what ordinary people could endure. The Demon King listened quietly before asking what kind of organization the anti-angel unit truly was. The woman explained that mana aptitude tests were conducted across the nation, and youths with high potential were gathered into specialized academies. From there, only the best were selected to join the anti-angel units. She added that even among those chosen, only about 100 became full-fledged regulars. The position came with generous pay and benefits, making it a highly sought-after path. Hearing this, the Demon King was visibly surprised. Only that many, he thought. As she continued explaining, he began connecting the pieces. Despite being considered elite, their actual strength was far below what he had expected. The so-called veterans barely compared to what he had faced in the past. His thoughts drifted to the ancient war, the last great angelic invasion from 6 centuries ago. The similarities were impossible to ignore. The flawed mana theories, the unstable tools, the emergence of a new variant, it all mirrored the early signs of that catastrophe. He clenched his fist. If history was repeating itself, then humanity was woefully unprepared. Even one more capable fighter could shift the balance. And if that was the case, he couldn't afford to stay on the sidelines. With resolve, he made his decision. He would infiltrate their system. He would train them himself. Then, speaking aloud, he calmly declared that he would be joining the regulars. The room fell silent. Morning classes had begun at the Anti-Angel Academy. Students were already seated at their desks when Asahi noticed someone arriving late. She looked up and remarked that he was late again. The Demon King replied calmly that he had just come from speaking with the chairman. Curious, she asked what it was about. He simply told her she would find out soon enough. Just then, the classroom door slid open. The instructor followed closely behind and called for everyone's attention. He announced that a special mock battle would be held to determine the next candidates for regular status. The room erupted into chatter. Some students panicked, others whispered in excitement, and a few looked visibly uneasy. Someone muttered that it was far too sudden. The instructor continued, announcing the first matchup, Yamazaki Kaioi versus Momoyama Mizuki. Yamazaki's face drained of color, while the girl looked equally shocked, clearly not expecting her name to be called. Then the second pairing was announced, Sakuraba Asahi versus Mizukami Daya. The classroom went silent. Asahi turned sharply toward him and demanded to know what he had done. He merely smiled and greeted her casually. The memory of the earlier meeting surfaced in his mind. He had stood before the chairman, who was reviewing multiple screens. The man had told him bluntly that with his current record, there was no way he could recommend him as a regular. The Demon King had replied that if he demonstrated sufficient combat ability, things might be different. The chairman scoffed and said that theoretical knowledge meant nothing without results. He added that if the Demon King truly wanted recognition, he would need to prove himself in battle, specifically by defeating Sakuraba Asahi. The Demon King had accepted without hesitation. He then added that he would also train Momoyama Mizuki and have her defeat Yamazaki Kaioi as well. The chairman had laughed loudly, calling the idea absurd, 2 underperformers defeating the academy's top students. He asked whether the Demon King was serious. The Demon King had replied that if that wasn't convincing enough, he was willing to stake his expulsion on it. That finally wiped the amusement from the chairman's face. Now, standing in the classroom, the weight of that decision hung in the air. The Demon King remained calm, while the others slowly began to realize what was truly at stake. A notification appeared appeared on the chairman's terminal. Dormitory incident report. Cardiac arrest due to suspected mana-stimulant overdose. Cause bullying. Case closed. The chairman stared at the message in silence. If the boy dropped out on his own, it would spare him the trouble. With that thought, he made his decision. He approved the condition. Both candidates would have to win. Back in the present, the announcement echoed through the training hall. When the matchups were revealed, the bully froze in disbelief. His opponent was that same girl. He scoffed, muttering that it had to be some kind of joke. Were they really treating him like this? Giving him such an easy match? The Demon King calmly remarked that if defeating her earned him a spot in the unit, then it should be an easy win. The bully gritted his teeth and snapped back that once he crushed her, the Demon King would be next. Asahi looked uneasy, but the Demon King reassured her quietly, telling her not to worry. He reminded her that as long as she followed his instructions, she would win. Hearing that, she gathered her courage and nodded. She promised herself she would grow stronger before the match. The bully scoffed again, saying he hoped she wouldn't get hurt too badly. Asahi shot back that he should be more worried about himself. The way she said it made him scoff, but the Demon King merely smirked. Soon after, training resumed. The Demon King oversaw everything carefully, watching every movement as he prepared her for the coming battle. He asked about her specialty, and she admitted that barrier magic was the only thing she was good at. She added quietly that it was because she was afraid of getting hurt. Instead of mocking her, he nodded in approval. He told her that fear, when understood, became a powerful instinct for survival. That answer surprised her. He continued, explaining that fear sharpened awareness, and that with the right mindset, it could be turned into strength. Then he made his plan clear. Against Yamazaki, they would rely solely on barrier magic. She stared at him in disbelief. Barriers were meant to defend, not to win battles. But the Demon King only smiled. He told her that magic wasn't about raw force, it was about how it was used, and that he intended to show her exactly how. The training ground fell silent as she realized what kind of fight awaited her. The All-Academy mock battle arena buzzed with anticipation. Students filled the stands, whispering excitedly as the participants stepped forward. Asahi stood among them, while the Demon King watched calmly from the sidelines. Across the field, the bully and Mizuki took their positions. The announcer's voice echoed through the arena, stating that victory would be decided either by forcing a surrender or rendering the opponent unconscious. He warned that he would intervene only if the situation became lethal. The bully smirked confidently, clearly expecting an easy win. Mizuki, on the other hand, looked tense but resolute. As the match began, the bully immediately charged forward, declaring that he would end it quickly. Mizuki reacted just as she had been trained, instantly deploying her barrier. The crowd murmured. Some scoffed, calling her defense weak. The bully laughed and continued attacking, pounding the barrier again and again. Mizuki gritted her teeth, holding the shield in place. She could feel the pressure building. Doubt crept in. Maybe this was all she could do. Then the bully shouted again and unleashed another powerful strike. At that moment, something changed. The barrier absorbed the blow completely. A faint sphere formed beneath it, humming with energy. The bully stared in disbelief. He shouted in frustration, calling it useless, and hurled another attack. A massive explosion followed, shaking the arena. When the dust cleared, the barrier was still standing. Mizuki was still standing. The crowd fell silent. The bully stared in shock. His confidence cracked as he realized his attacks weren't breaking through. Suddenly, the barrier shifted. It moved. The audience gasped as the barrier began to move independently, lifting and pulling at the bully's position. His eyes widened as he felt himself being dragged upward. He shouted in disbelief, demanding to know how she was doing it. Mizuki focused, her hands trembling as she remembered the Demon King's lesson, how he had demonstrated bending a barrier, shaping it like clay, even folding it in on itself. She had thought it was impossible, but now she forced her mana to obey. The barrier twisted, folding inward, trapping the bully inside its shifting walls. He screamed in shock as the structure closed around him. The crowd was silent. Mizuki, breathing hard, stared at what she had done. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were steady. She whispered to herself that maybe, just maybe, she could really do this. And in the stands, the Demon King watched quietly, a faint smile crossing his face. The barrier began to close in. The bully's confidence finally cracked as he realized what was happening. The walls were moving slowly, deliberately, sealing him inside. He shouted in panic, accusing her of cheating, claiming the top was still open. Mizuki remained focused. With a sharp motion, she sealed the opening as well. The crowd gasped. The bully slammed his fists against the barrier, shouting for her to let him out, demanding the match be stopped. But she didn't respond. Instead, she calmly pointed out that while her offensive spells were weak, the barrier itself could do something far worse. She explained that, by controlling the airflow inside, she could gradually burn away the oxygen. Panic took over his face. He screamed in desperation, pounding the walls harder, but the barrier didn't even tremble. He shouted that he wouldn't lose like this, but his strength was already fading. His movements slowed, his breathing grew erratic, and his vision blurred. Mizuki watched, trembling but resolute. She said quietly that she could maintain the barrier all day if she wanted. The bully cursed her, struggling to stay upright as the oxygen thinned. Finally, his legs gave out, and he collapsed to his knees, gasping desperately for air. Just as his consciousness began to slip, the barrier shattered outward. He fell forward, coughing violently, dragging in desperate gulps of air. Mizuki staggered back in shock, startled by the sudden release. But before she could recover, the bully lunged forward, roaring in rage, launching a desperate attack. She barely had time to react. But instead of panic, clarity struck. She formed her mana into a blade clean, sharp, and stable. The blade flashed. The attack was cut apart mid-motion. The announcer's voice rang through the arena, declaring the match over and naming Mizuki the winner. The crowd erupted. Asahi let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The Demon King watched silently, a faint smile tugging at his lips. The defeated bully stared in disbelief. Fury and humiliation etched across his face. Mizuki stood trembling but proud, her chest rising and falling as the realization hit her. She had won. The Demon King approached her calmly and praised her effort. She bowed her head slightly, exhausted but smiling. He told her to rest now and watch the remainder of the matches. As she sat down, she let out a long breath, her entire body shaking from exhaustion and relief. But the real show is about to begin.
Guys, that's the end of the video. If you like this video, please leave a comment in the comment section. Also subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. Like the video and share it too. Thank you for watching and see you next time again.